Welcome to the Creative Cynergy Show, where we're talking whole body health for writers and creative professionals. I'm your host, Coach Cyn, and today we're going to be diving into specifically why writers always feel so tired. You know what I'm talking about? When you sit down and you might be excited about a story, you sit down, you get ready to write it, nothing comes because you're just so tired. And then no matter how many cups of coffee you load up on, it still doesn't produce the creative output that you want. The story idea that's in here doesn't translate to the page. Well, we're going to dive into the reasons for that. And you might be mistaking it as being lazy or lack of discipline, when in fact, it's not any of those things. This is not a system problem, not a motivation problem. It's a functional problem. We're going to dive into exactly what makes that happen. So today's episode is actually going to cover desk routines that you can use to help you manage brain fog and mental fatigue. It's showtime, Cynergy. Okay, writers, let's get into exactly why you feel so drained all the time. Well, it comes down to a couple of different things, and we've talked about this a number of times on the Creative Cynergy Show, but it's worth repeating. So the first thing that you need to recognize is how important sleep is. Because if, as I've said before, if you're not getting a proper night's rest, and that includes deep REM sleep, then you're not recharging your battery. Think about it. You're using your mind all day long. And a lot of people don't recognize that when you use your mind in such a capacity, the way creatives do, it's similar in the manner that someone would use their body on a construction job or something that was more physically demanding. The way that we use our brains as creatives is that we're always going. It's almost 100 miles a minute for some of us because we're always consistently thinking and creating and problem solving in different ways. So the mind never really shuts off, even at rest, if you're not getting proper rest. So the first thing you want to do is to ensure that you are getting a proper night's sleep so that you are, in fact, recharging that battery. You ever look at your cell phone and when it gets down to like 15% and you don't have a charger, you start freaking out a little bit, right? Because you know how fast that is going to wind down based on all the apps that you're using. Well, think of your brain the same way. There's multiple apps in your brain and they're all used for different functions. So the more that those are used, but you're running on empty, the faster that battery is going to drain. So you want to recharge, you want to plug back into your outlet, which is actually getting a good night's rest. So as we've talked about here before on the Creative Cynergy Show, the way to do that is to form habits that you set up in advance to make sure that you are going to sleep at the same time every night. You are winding down much, much earlier than just kind of crashing into bed. Eliminate caffeine, alcohol, blue light, and just make sure that you are consistent in your sleep schedule. It's called sleep. It's called sleep hygiene. Look into it. And it's extremely useful for not only just creative output, but your day to day, especially if you're juggling multiple things. So sleep being your number one ally in this fight against brain fog. The other thing that causes fatigue is, as I've said, poor nutrition. Now we sit at desks all day, we miss lunch or we eat at our desks, we skip breakfast and just have a big coffee. Dinner is gone through the drive-through. By the time your day is over, the lack of nutritional meals that you've put in your body is actually tanking your energy. And the way you try to counter that is by shoveling more coffee or caffeine or soda, what have you, down your throat, when in fact what you need is balanced nutrition throughout the day. Don't be afraid of carbohydrates. I know everybody out here trying to cut carbs. So carb cycling, keto, fasting, all of those things are advanced techniques for seasoned athletes and people who have been in the gym for quite a bit of time. But for you, for most of the viewers here watching or listening to this program, we are going to start with the basics for you. And one of the ways that you can do that is with my guide here, Staying Fit As You Sit. So inside this guide, you have everything you need to get started on your own wellness journey. And that includes how to prepare meals for your day-to-day in a way that is fast and functional so that you're not sitting in the kitchen for hours on end, but you're also not running out the door and not having anything prepared. So then you're just going on the fly. And what happens is exactly what I say. You're skipping meals, going through drive-thrus, and it's a vicious circle. So meal prepping is an excellent way to start to counteract some of those pitfalls of nutrition. The other thing that we need to recognize specifically for writers is how cognitive overload actually starts to arise. And I'll give you another example like I did with the apps before. Consider your browser, and when you have multiple tabs open, that it's pulling different resources to each of those tabs. Not to mention, if you're constantly switching back and forth between these tabs, if you have an older computer, say, it starts to drain those resources really quickly, and sometimes you'll get a freeze. Well, your brain reacts the same way based on just overload. You're jumping back and forth between your writing and your work and your day-to-day and your kids and everything else. There's so many tabs open that you start to freeze up. And then when you go to try to write, all that's staring back at you is a blank page. Now, there's many different things, or we'll call them the tabs that are open, that contribute to this cognitive overload, and that's dehydration. Like I talked about prior, really having your nutrition dialed in is one facet of it, but also most people don't drink enough water. And what you can do is to have a jug by your desk at all times and fill it up twice a day, and you're getting quite a bit of water intake where you probably wouldn't be otherwise. Most people think, I'll just have a glass of water and I'll be fine. By the time you feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So make sure you're drinking enough water. The other thing is posture. Now, we need to dive into this a little bit more because as writers, especially as we get into the flow of things, you ever notice you start out nice and tall and then throughout the day, you're slumped down? Yeah, well, once you start to concave on yourself or in yourself, it takes away your breathing, it hurts your shoulders, it zaps your energy. We want to make sure we're sitting upright, our feet are flat on the floor, on a step stool, to make sure that the legs are parallel to the ground and that your hips are not turned in a manner that they're pulling everything forward. You want your hands set up in a way so that they are positioned properly on the keyboard, and that will relate to the shoulders as well. And the other thing is to get up and stretch every now and then so you're not locked into a position. But the other thing that can come with like a brain freeze or fog is that you're getting into an emotional overload as well. So a lot of the times when we start to create, we feel like it has to be perfect at the outset. And that couldn't be further from the truth, especially when it comes to writing. Because what is perfect, per se? The only one who knows what the story is before you put it out into the world is you. So the perfectionism comes from having the story in your head that you want it to come onto the page exactly how you see it in your head. That doesn't usually work. You'll get a facet of the story or some semblance of it, but it's never exactly as you pictured it. Most of the time it's better, especially consider that the first draft is never going to stay perfect. It's never going to stay like that. First drafts are exactly that. They're first drafts. And one of the best pieces of writing advice I ever got was to write for the wastebasket. Now, what that means is that first draft, most of it's going on the cutting room floor, as they say in the movie business, or it's going into the wastebasket, because no matter how perfect you think it's going to be outright, it never usually is. So there's going to be multiple rounds of revision. So don't hold on to perfectionism so much that it makes you freeze and not able to function. So right now, what I actually want you to do is an action item. While you're watching this episode, get yourself some water and give it a nice big gulp down, full glass of water before you continue on with this episode. The other thing you can do is you get up, you go and get your cup of water, preferably a large cup of water. You come back and sit down. When you come back and sit down in front of the computer screen here, I want you to make sure that the height of the chair is set up in a way that your feet are flat on the floor and you have a back support. So those are a couple of things that you can do right now to start to get into better habits so that you can start to counter this mental fatigue. Because as you start to set these habits and rituals, it's going to help you a lot more than just motivation. So a lot of the times you'll see videos from people and they're just motivating you. And that's great to pump you up while you're watching. But what you need to do is you need a takeaway from whatever is being said that you can start to incorporate in your real life, in your day-to-day. And that's what we're going to do right now. So I'm going to set you up with some cues that you can use to just break up your day anytime you're feeling that brain fog kick in or that mental fatigue. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tackle the desk. because your workspace is like your lair, right? You have it set up a certain way to be productive. Well, what you might not know is, yes, you set it up, straight and narrow the first time, but as work starts to accumulate and you've got stacks of paper and everything else, fast food wrappers, I don't know, it starts to become a little bit cluttered. So it's no longer conducive to a proper working space. So what I want you to do right now, pause this episode if you need to, take anything off of your desk that is not conducive to your creative output, or whatever novel piece of art that you're working on right now. If whatever's on your desk doesn't have directly affect that work, get rid of it. Clear it away, put it into a box, a drawer, whatever, and just really focus on the task at hand. The next thing I want you to do when you get ready to open up that document that you're working on, or if you work long form, hand to paper, like I still do that sometimes, before you even get started, take a nice deep inhale, hold it, and then exhale all of that air out. And then do that a couple of times until you start to get primed and ready and focus. When you focus on your breathing, and this is an important cue that I use when I'm training my wellness clients, breathing actually spurs on the physical action. Think of it as the nitric oxide that they use in the Fast and Furious movies. It's that extra fuel to boost you into whatever specific thing that you're doing. Say, for example, with my clients, I always tell them it helps them to get those extra couple of reps when they enhance their it helps them to get that extra couple of reps when they engage their breathing properly. And the same can be said for getting your writing flow going. When you manage your breathing, it helps to manage your state. Regardless of how much you prepare, your energy is going to fluctuate. That's just a given. Life is not linear. It's got many ups and downs and ebbs and flows. And there's going to be times when you are feeling fatigued. But as you start to incorporate things, like I said, habits and rituals to help ease your overload, the overload of the system, it will help you to maintain staying in that creative flow. Now, rather than powering through any kind of fatigue that starts to set in when you are creating, just start to develop habits that you can use to recognize that that's coming on. And knowing that instead of powering through it or getting some soda or coffee, you instead now have different tools that you can use to get through those times when you are feeling drained. Because a lot of the times it's mental overload that is supposed to be compartmentalized, but now it's starting to flood into your brain and thus into your writing. So you're completely distracted. If you write on your computer and you have the multiple tabs open and you're jumping back and forth online to maybe do research, and then you get distracted by a YouTube video or whatever else, you got to answer that email. The distractions start to pile up, and then everything starts to wane on you. And not only that, but you start to feel guilty because now you've been pulled away from that writing session to do something else. Well, what's a way that you can establish some kind of boundary with that? Stop writing on the computer. Now, you don't have to necessarily write longhand on a pad. That's old school. Although I still believe that method works, but that works for me. But there are ways that you can use, but there are different types of word programs or similar that you can use offline that will help you to maintain your writing flow rather than getting distracted, going online and so forth. The other thing that you can do is to put your phone away, put it in another room, because if you're getting multiple dings from text messages or your app notifications, that's going to distract you as well. So you want to be focused, not have your focus on a million different things, which eventually starts to burn you out and leads to the fatigue that we're talking about. So just start to set up some habits and boundaries for yourself that you know that you can lean into now. The clean desk, we got the water, we're going to get our nutrition in check, we are going to establish the boundaries with the tech, and we're going to get proper sleep. And if you start to incorporate these things over time, you're going to realize that it's helping to relieve the mental fog, and you'll think clearer and you'll produce better work. So let me know which of these that you are going to try in the next coming weeks and how it's helped you with your creative performance. I'd love to hear it. And I'd also love to hear anything else that you think would be helpful on this channel, on this podcast, because essentially that's what I'm here to do, is to help you get healthier and more productive. But until then, make sure you've liked, subscribe, send it to your friends, and we'll see you next time. For now, show's over, Cynergy.